Recent set images and casting news for Hawkeye's Disney Plus show reveal Clint Barton is sporting some new tech, and it appears to be hearing aids? Is MCU finally ready to tackle Hawkeye's disability? Hawkeye fans, assemble! MCU's hardest working Avenger. Yeah, you heard it. No superpowers, no billionaire iron suits, no wall-crawling abilities. Still does his job. This eagle-eyed archer is moving to Disney Plus for his own TV series, and it appears MCU may finally adapt one of Clint Barton's main story arcs in the comics, going deaf. But how did Hawkeye lose his hearing exactly? To know that, let's dive deep into comic lore. Hawkeye's history of hearing loss begins in the 1983 limited series by Mark Grunwald. Hawkeye and Mockingbird get captured by the Death Throes. Their leader, Crossfire, who is related to Darren Cross, better known as Yellow Jacket in Ant-Man, has a plan to kill the Avengers by first killing Hawkeye. Then, when the Avengers come to his funeral, Crossfire would kill all of the Avengers.
Ooh, a plan fiendishly clever in its intricacies.
In Hawkeye issue number 4, Crossfire uses a mind-controlling device which makes both Mockingbird and Hawkeye start fighting one another. They beat the crap out of each other, but at some point Hawkeye snaps out of it and slips a sonic arrowhead into his mouth. When activated, it nullifies the effects of the machine long enough for him to regain control, but it blasts out his eardrums. He's then able to KO Mockingbird safely, and Crossfire is defeated because, and this is kind of hilarious, Crossfire can't pull Hawkeye's bow. Twing! Mockingbird is the one who later gets him hearing aids and helps him adjust to being deaf. All of this is explained while Hawkeye and Mockingbird are soaking it up in a hot tub together after eloping. We'll just keep that one in the comics and not tell his MCU wife. Okay, Miss Cardellini? Fast forward to Avengers 502. Hawkeye sacrifices his life to take down a Kree warship after his arrows were set alight in battle. But like all comic superheroes who die, they eventually come back to life. In Marvel's House of M crossover, in which Scarlet Witch's powers remake the history of the Marvel Universe, Hawkeye returns to life. Clint's hearing was revealed to have been cured. Now, it wasn't until 2014 in Matt Fraction's and David Aja's critically acclaimed Hawkeye run that in issue number 15, Hawkeye is stabbed in both ears by the villain Clown, once again losing his hearing. What was incredibly special about Fraction's Hawkeye was the inclusion of ASL in the comic book, as Fraction was inspired by Leah Coleman, who is deaf, and her mother, Rachel Coleman, who runs the award-winning TV show Signing Time. In this series, Hawkeye pushes back against sign language and must learn to accept his own hearing loss. Readers see him drink, not taking care of himself, and struggling to read lips and understand what others are saying. All the while, there are flashbacks to an abusive childhood where domestic violence has already deafened a young Clint Barton. We learn, though, in Hawkeye number 19, that Hawkeye was beaten so much as a kid that his father deafened him, which means he's had hearing problems his whole life. Now, instead of kind of a plot device from the 80s that feels like it doesn't have too much significance, Fraction and Aja's Hawkeye illustrates real American Sign Language in lieu of speech bubbles. Hawkeye and his brother Barney use ASL because it's the most effective way to communicate. This really stands out in today's culture. How often do you see a comic book hero using sign language? Answer, not often. Perhaps the best part of all this is that once Hawkeye begins to use ASL with the rest of his friends and family, they completely accept him and his message without hesitation. Even your favorite Canadian merc with a mouth, Deadpool, shows his support by learning a small amount of ASL to communicate in Hawkeye vs. Deadpool. It is also revealed that his new tech, hearing aids, were created by none other than Tony Stark.
In the comics, Hawkeye is hard of hearing, but in the movies that isn't really addressed. So what are your thoughts on that, or did you have any input?
Oh, I didn't know about that, so thanks for making me aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Now, exactly how the MCU brings about Hawkeye's deafness remains to be seen, or heard. The franchise might loosely adapt one of the comic storylines, showing how Clint begins to lose his hearing as a result of a mission gone awry. But taking all this in, Hawkeye's show is shaping up to be a strong, compelling narrative, much like Netflix's Daredevil, both of which dealt with superheroes with disabilities. Except remember when Netflix didn't provide audio descriptions for Daredevil, leaving people with visual disabilities unable to watch the show? Bravo, Netflix. Bravo. Disney and Marvel have a chance to not only make an exciting story arc for MCU's most unused superhero, but make a difference in the deaf community. Here's one crazy theory of how MCU could give Hawkeye hearing loss. Remember in MCU they say holding an Infinity Stone is a big no-no? Well, guess who's holding an Infinity Stone in Endgame? Clint Barton. Maybe that's the reason he loses his hearing. Is that a stretch?